A new Amnesty International report claims that members of the Iranian security forces raped and used other forms of sexual violence against both women and men detained in the crackdown on nationwide protests that erupted last year following the death in police custody of Mahsa Amini. The group says that it documented 45 cases of rape, gang rape, or sexual violence, but believes that this is part of a wider pattern. Now, for more on this, we can speak to Diana Eltahawy, Amnesty International's Deputy Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa. Diana, thank you for speaking to us. First of all, I'd like you to tell our viewers a little bit about the main findings of this report and how Amnesty International went about collecting those testimonies.
Yes, in the report issued today, Amnesty International exposes how Iranian security and intelligence forces have used rape, gang rape, and other forms of sexual violence as a weapon to crush the Women Life Freedom uprising that rocked Iran between September and December of last year. Amnesty International was able to document in detail the harrowing accounts of 45 survivors of rape and other forms of sexual violence, women, men, and children as young as 12, who recounted to the organization how they were arrested in the context of protests, forcibly placed into vans by security and intelligence forces, and then taken to official or unofficial places of detention, including schools, warehouses, residential buildings that were unlawfully repurposed to commit these horrific acts. In addition to these 45 detailed cases that Amnesty documented, we heard accounts from survivors of rape and other sexual violence and other former detainees about additional cases of rape and other sexual violence committed in detention against scores of detainees. And this all shows that the crimes that we documented are not isolated, but they're part of a wider pattern. Despite all this, we have seen prosecutors and judges being complicit in this machinery of torture and other ill treatment, including rape and other forms of sexual violence. Prosecutors have dismissed or ignored or covered up complaints by survivors who courageously spoke to them or showed them their torture marks. They have shielded officials from prosecution.
Now, one of the things that struck me while reading the report was that many of the victims were men and boys. And of course, there's no surprise that in Iran, it is a society marked by gender-based violence. But the fact that those victims, a lot of them were men and boys, was that a surprise to you, or were you expecting this?
Amnesty International has a long investigated violations committed in the context of crackdowns on the multiple waves of protests that shook Iran from 2017. And we have long documented the systematic use of torture and other ill treatment. What was a surprise to us in the context of the Women Life Freedom uprising is the rise in reports of rape and other forms of sexual violence committed against women and girls, as well as men and boys. We have documented how protesters, regardless of their gender, were punished and intimidated because they went to the streets to call for the establishment of a new political system respecting human rights and non-discrimination, because they protested against forced veiling laws. And we have documented these cases, as I say, against children as young as 12, as well as men and boys.
And Amnesty International did share the results, the findings of this report with the Iranian authorities. Unsurprisingly, apparently you didn't get any response. What are you hoping about that will come of publishing this report?
Well, Amnesty International wants to shine a light on the horrific ordeals of protesters in Iran. And we want the international community to stand with survivors in their pursuit of justice. Given the systemic crisis of impunity in Iran and no prospects of accountability domestically, we ask that the international community supports efforts to achieve truth, justice, and reparation for survivors. And in this context, we're calling for the international community to support the extension of the mandate of the fact-finding mission in Iran, so it is able to pursue its investigations into crimes under international law and other gross human rights violations committed in the context of the protests. We are also calling on states to exercise universal jurisdiction to initiate criminal investigations against those suspected of responsibility in committing crimes under international law, with a view, if there is admissible evidence, of issuing international arrest warrants. Without the cycle of impunity being broken, we fear further bloodshed and we fear further horrific violations against people in Iran.
Diana Eltahawy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.